Hello, that's me, Anton Kolonin. The other day we were talking about the graphs that are present in our Aigents application, and these graphs let you browse your social environment in social networks and blockchains like Steemit, Golos, or even Ethereum. And in these graphs you can actually see your environment, see your connections, and use different filters to explore your social environment. But this time we will be talking about new sorts of graphs that we are supporting in our Aigents application. And after that we'll also talk about our further work on reputation graphs, and we'll give little tutorial to the developers who can actually use this functionality in their own applications. So we have provided now graphs for news and topics that form this news. So given your daily feed that you have here in the Aigents application, you can use menu to call graphs of news and graphs of topics. On the graphs of news, you see all news sources that are built in your news feed. You see your news items that are actually appearing on your news feed. And you actually dive in and see the content of these news items, and you see the times of the actually the days that are contributing to these news items. And we actually have a bunch of controls that can operate the layout. Like, for example, if we don't want to use power directed layout, then we use some natural arrangement of the items, and the natural arrangement of the items on the screen, nodes on the graph, can be actually driven by a few different parameters. For example, we can select the slicing mode. The slicing mode tells that you want to slice nodes of different types in different areas of the graph. For example, right now we have slicing mode vertical, so we have all news sources at the upper side of the screen, we have all news items in the middle, and we have all dates at the bottom. But we can change this. We can change mode to horizontal, and we see the slicing is different. So all news sources on the left, all news items in the middle, and all times on the right. Let's stick to vertical, and also we can control radius of the news item, so we can see some pictures. That's not quite good picture. That picture looks better, but anyway, let's restore original node size. So besides node radius and slicing mode, you can control power layout. For example, if we want to have nodes to be arranged evenly on the screen, we can specify the threshold for layout. We can specify whether we want to restrict node movement in the horizontal direction right now or in vertical direction, or we let them move in every direction, so the most natural connectivity and layout corresponding to node connectivity is achieved. Let's stick to default. And also we can have the filters that can make filtering based on node type. Like we can switch off links between news items and sites. We can switch off links between times and news sources and news items. We can turn off entire sites section. We can turn off entire times section. We can turn off entire news section. Okay, we can turn off anything, but let's stay from something. So using this filter control, we can also do some filtering. Like if I want to have something about AI appearing on the screen, here are the items relevant to AI. Let me be more focused. If there is anything about AGI, nothing about AGI, blockchain. Okay, here are the things about the blockchain. Let's say I'm interested about this one. So okay, so I have one item about the blockchain. I see the site where it appears, and I see the dates where news about blockchain are appearing on different at different dates. I can select the site, and here are the news that are appearing from this particular site. I can go back to news source, I can go back to day, and so here I see all news coming from each particular day. And by the way, I can remove all filtering. The arrangement of the items by default, if we don't apply the power force, corresponds to what we call a reputation or rank of each of the nodes or vertices on the graph. So reputation means amount of linkage the node is getting from the other items, and the linkage is also weighted with account to relevance of the news. So here, remember, on the Aigents news feed, you have all that social and personal relevance. Blue one is personal relevance, green one is social relevance. So we sum up these two relevances and consider relevance of the news items. And when we go to the graph, these relevances are represented by color saturation, by blue halo size around the item or node, and relative position of the node on the graph. Like we see that the news meet edu is the most relevant site among the sites, and this particular news items is the most relevant item across all news items. By the way, if we turn slicing mode off, then we can see something like absolute relevance of everything that we have on this graph. Like we have the news source news me to do the top relevant, Reuters second relevant, and then we have some soup of the different things. Well, and by the way, the default sorting on the horizontal axis is corresponding to alphabet. So by default, if there is no layout applied, then we can see that the items are sorted on the horizontal axis accordingly to the alphabetic sorting rule. That was first sort of graph. The other sort of graph is graph of topics. So here we see not particular news items, but here we see particular topics of our interest, the topics that are represented on these sites, like something about deep learning, something about Trump, something about IBM. We can click on IBM and see everything connected to IBM, like IBM was mentioned with high relevant links and high relevant news on the news meet edu, and it was somehow mentioned on GraphGrail.com website, and we see the dates where IBM was mentioned. And if we see that these 2 days are highly relevant to mentioning IBM, we can see which are topics were mentioned at the same day with IBM. So we have had something about deep learning, IBM, bots, Google, IBM, Apple, etc., etc. Personal assistant. Let's see what we have about personal assistant. We see the dates where personal assistant is mentioned and the site where it was mentioned. And another sort of graphs that we have in the agents now is about friends. So we can see graph of friends, and the friends are arranged from two different kinds of connections. First of all, there are social networks where the friends of mine are connected to me. Like I see all friends connected to me via Aigents. Not surprisingly, I have a lot of them here. Friends connected to me via Facebook, friends connected to me via Google, and then I can actually see each of the friends and see what are the connections with these friends. So I see that this particular person is connected to me via Aigents and Google+, but not on Facebook. Also, there are trust and share. So trust and share corresponds to the kind of relationship that I have established with this person. So if I have sharing relationship with this person. That means that I share my news feeds to this particular person if he or she wants to actually trust me and get this news to me. And as an opposite, the trust relationship means that if the people are sharing their news feeds with me, then I am actually trusting them to get this news from them. So here are the most trustable connections in my environment. And I see this person is connected to me only on the Aigents platform. So that was the third part of graph. Now let's see the direction of our future work. And that's represented on the particular URL, and that's on our public website. So actually you can go here and try to play with your own data and try to see what we are doing and try to apply it to your own work if you are interested about this. So here we are trying to build what we call reputation graphs, and reputation graphs involve two different things. First of all, reputation graphs involve particular people. Sorry, let's leave people. So we have people here, and these people, let us make it more nice. So let's have the graph populated around the screen. So I have the network of people which are rating one another. So these rates may be votes on blockchain social networks like Steemit or Golos. These rates may be likes on the social networks like Facebook, Google Plus, or whatever. Or these rates may be what we call implicit ratings, like financial transactions on the Ethereum blockchain. So if I pay some money for some person, that probably this person is valuable for me. That means I rate this person somehow with my confidence because I'm sending my money to this person. So we see the network of ratings being conducted from one person to another. And given these ratings, we can figure out who is the most reputable person in the environment and who is the less. Like, for example, we have Mary who rates John and Bob, but no one rates Mary, so Mary so far hasn't earned a substantial amount of reputation. But we also see that there is Phil who is rated by Patrick, and the rate value is very high, so the arrows actually different widths of arrows are corresponding to different amount of trust or value or attention, you call it, which we assume corresponds to the value of rating. So, and because we see that John is rating Scott, the Mary is rating John, and Scott is rating Patrick, and also Scott is rated by Sophia, we assume that that Patrick is eventually gets a lot of reputation, and then that rating that Patrick is given to Phil makes Phil the most reputable person here. So by the way, let's remove force directed layout. So we have natural classification of items. So we see that the Phil is the most reputable person on this graph. Let's remove slicing. Oops. Now let's go to sites. We also have sites here. And let me 1 second. Slicing not vertical. Yeah. So here is reputation with involvement of websites. So these sites are connected to people with another kinds of links. So the links between people are about rating, and the links between sites and people are about funding. By the way, this picture is quite speculative, so that's not a real data. You can create this kind of fake data yourself, but you can consider that different people have different relationships with different sites, and we can evaluate the actual value of these sites given these relationships to particular people. Actually, you can play with this. Let's consider some really toy example. So let's remove the data that is loaded from file, and let's take some example. You can play with yourself. So actually here is the graph data that you can use. So there are three sections. So the first section represents actually links between people and between entities. So we can see that Bob likes Mary, Bob likes Jane, then Jane visits Timot, Bob visits Timot, Mary likes Bob, and so also we can say that Bob is person, Jane is person, Steemit is site, Facebook is site, and we can also supply some images, so the graph is looking nicer. But let's now close it and re-render it, and we see that we have some relationships between person, who likes who, and we have some relationships between sites. Well, we don't have relationships between sites, but let's add them. So let's say that Steemit mentions Facebook. Okay, let's close this. Okay, so we see new link here, right? So now if we leave only the sites on the screen, we see the connection between Steemit and Facebook, and the connection is mentions. And again, if we turn people on, we see the graph of reputation across people. We see the reputation levels of the people on the vertical axis, like Bob is less reputable, Jane is the most reputable, and we see who visits what. And based on the visits and reputations of the people, we can see the most reputable site is Facebook and the less reputable site is Steemit. So, and that's because many people with high reputation visit Facebook, and in addition to that, Steemit is mentioned in Facebook in some of the posts. So Facebook is accumulating all that attention and reputation from different perspectives. And by the way, this particular example is, as I said, quite usable. So you can take this graph either from the text you enter or paste yourself, or you can load it from our website. So there is reputation 3 file, we have reputation 2 file. Let me try it. Yeah, that's just some toy example. And by the way, you can actually render it in line, or you can render it in pop-up window. So you have the same picture but in the pop-up window, and you can play with it in the way you like. And by the way, there is another example. You can create just very simple graph just with some completely fake abstract data. Now, the goal of this exercise is let ability for every person or every community to come up with something like reputation or a bias or reliability map for the news sources around of them. For example, this nice picture is compiled by, let's see, some particular site. And this picture represents kind of reliability and trustability and bias map across United States online media. But this map is done by particular people for particular purpose, and we assume that given every person has some representative community of their own, or there is some company that has some community of the experts, then can come up with such maps like here themselves, given then they can accumulate particular ratings or particular set of information, so in open sources or their own corporate or closed environment, and then they can build their own reliability and attention graphs and maps using our instruments themselves. And in fact, that's all possible. The software where I'm describing now is getting open sourced. For example, graph and reputation analysis in the API is all JavaScript. So here is just example how you do that. So for example, to call this inline and pop-up graphs, you need just to call either of the two functions here on screen, and each of these two functions are just calling same setup graph, where you just take data either from custom file on the site or from the custom text you enter in the text control. Then you provide some options, for example, the way you want to render particular slices or particular colors, and whether you want to have links labeled or not, and then you just call build graph, and you can enjoy playing with this graph either in inline or pop-up window. If you want to go in details, we have sources referenced. So the most important source is Aigents graph, and if you go to it, you can also see that that's open source MIT license, and we have a bunch of APIs here that you can study and can start trying to use. The source code is not officially released, so it's more like alpha version, so you can just try and play and give us your feedback, and we hope to make official announcement of our code release sometime this year later. So it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you and goodbye.